Good afternoon and welcome everyone to session 7 of our mining webinar series, Great Minds Think Alike, where we dig deeper into the complexities of mining and explore the business below the surface. The reason we created this series is because the mining landscape has changed dramatically over the past few years. There are multiple challenges and trends, being more complexity, massive efficiency and productivity losses, environmental and safety challenges. But we're also presented with opportunities such as re-evaluating methodologies, digitalization, automation, and using new technologies that better enable visibility. Initially, we gather a big picture overview of current challenges and trends, and then thereafter dive into each aspect of the complexities faced by mining companies, along with the approaches and tools to overcome those challenges. With the mining industry incurring billions of productivity and efficiency-driven losses annually, it's imperative to constantly re-evaluate the methodologies we use. The mining industry has taken the same approach to mine planning for more than 30 years, and we need to employ new methodologies if we expect to get different results. Because the value chain is so complex, we have decided to create a separate session for each element in order to really dig deeper. So in session 1, we did a broad overview of the business of doing mining, particularly in the South African context. Session 2 focused on particularly advanced supply and demand planning. Session 3 was particularly about saving lives and introducing electronic permits to work. In 4 and 5, our partner was Aviva, and they focused on production management and unified supply chain management. In yesterday's session, we looked at data quality as an asset, and the amount of money that variances of as little as 1% can make on bottom line are staggering. Today, session 7, we are joined by Alexander Stensby from Klaveness Digital, all the way from Norway, and we're going to be talking about building resilient, cost-effective and decarbonized supply chains. Tomorrow morning, we will have session 8, which is about smart stockyard management. And finally, tomorrow afternoon, mining with a conscience, which will focus particularly on ESG and governance, risk and compliance. Please do, we want you to be interactive and engaged in the content during this session. So please feel free to share any comments or questions in the chat box as we go along, and we will try to answer them all at the end. If we do run out of time, we will make a point to contact you in an email to make sure your answers are understood and clarified. I'm going to hand over to Martin Marion. He is a specialist consultant with RSPH who has over 14 years of supply chain and advanced planning and scheduling experience. Martin, over to you.
Thanks, Caroline. And thanks for that introduction. Let me just share the right screen here. There we go. So, yeah, I'm going to introduce a rifle shot for any of the attendees that is joining us for the first time. And then just a short background on who Rifle Shot Performance Holdings are and what we do. So like Caroline said, this session is moving from reactive with predictive with Klaveness Digital. And you'll see a bit more about that when I introduce Alexander. You can also see there on the first side, Rifle Shot is celebrating more than 20 years of enhancing customers' capabilities, and I think a real good achievement for a smallish company like Rifle Shot to survive all of these storms that we've had, especially the recent storms, and still be very much alive and actually doing well after 20 years. So at Rifle Shot, our purpose is to, the bottom line is to improve customers' operational business performance, and to do this with a social conscience. We have a key approach to how we work with our customers and our partners. We have a innovative cube thought leadership. We believe in human capital development. So, we'd like to put our thought leadership and the human and the people side of things first before we get to the technology. The technology only enables people to do their jobs better and to add value to their companies. And that's why it's the third point on the bullets there. So we do the business transformation with the use of leading technologies and digitalization, like I said. The fourth point, specialized core competencies across the value chain. Again, coming back, and you'll see this throughout our slides, coming back to the people. We believe that the value lies with the people and their inherent knowledge, and the technology only enables that a bit better. And we do all of this keeping an eye and trying to enhance the environmental, social, and governance ecosystems, especially in today's times. Like to stay, deliver results and be profitable, but do it sustainably. So, not be short-sighted in the way we approach basically anything we do. So Rifle Shot, if you look at a company overview, it's been established in 2001. Very proudly a self-funded private company. And important for us, the third point there is we've got a key strategic clients and alliance and partnership ethos. So many of our relationships with our clients and our partners go back, even way before the company itself was founded. So, we believe that digitization, etc., is a journey, and it's not a once-off. It's not like you're just buying a product and we don't talk to one another. It's a long-term journey that we're all on. We've got African and international business and IM experience, and our management team, like you can see there, is over 180 years experience in business and in the industrial space as well. We've got something that we've trademarked there is a resultant. So we like to think of ourselves as resultants and not consultants. We focus on the results for the customer. We do things a bit differently. We don't just come in and work off a template and leave you with the results of the template, and you're sort of stuck to try and extract the value by yourselves. We like to deliver on the results and walk the journey with you to make sure that your investment actually keeps on delivering results, and it's not just a once-off exercise. Then lastly, Rifle Shot Performance Holdings is 52% owned by Madala and Associates, which is a BE, Black Women-owned level 1 company. And so that's enough about Rifle Shot. And today we're here with Klaveness Digital and the CargoValue solution. So Klaveness Digital is one of our more recent partners. I think probably been engaging now for maybe a year, 18 months. Very excited about the solutions that they deliver, and also the way that they deliver. I think it's important for Rifle Shot to have partners that sort of think the same way we do and have the same, I'll call it company culture. So let me hand over then directly to Alexander, which is Alec, as he's more commonly known, the managing director at Klaveness. And if you read there through his impressive CV, he's all about digital stuff and making technology work for his customers. So Alec, let me not take any more of your time.
Thank you very much, Martin. And I'm just struggling with getting my camera to play nice with me here. So if you just hang on for a little second. Don't know what's going on here. There we go. Hi, everyone. And let me then also share my screen. can get this going here. Technology, yeah. See what's going on there. All right, there we go. Can you see the screen okay, Martin?
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I'm Alex. As Martin has introduced me, I'm the CEO at Klaveness Digital, and I will today talk about CargoValue and how we work with the customers in the industry, and with a focus obviously on the mining industry. Just briefly, a little context and background on who we are. So Klaveness Digital was born out of a Norwegian family-owned shipping company called Torvald Klaveness, which is a 75-year-old company. So with a very long legacy from the predominantly dry bulk transportation space. With also a long relationship with large industrial companies in mining and metals, in the aluminium industry in particular. And Klaveness Digital was born out of the shipping company, initially with an ambition to look at how can we apply technology in the maritime sector. In 2018, Klaveness Digital was branched out as a separate company, focused on building and delivering CargoValue to industrial companies. We have a strong standing and a long history from the maritime space. The industry background is a key component of our culture and our heritage. And then combining that with the technology expertise, where we brought in people with the technology background. So I'm myself not from the maritime industry. I'm a software developer by trade, but have been building Klaveness Digital over the past years since inception. Working very closely with our customers across a range of different industries. So I will come a little bit back to CargoValue, but I want to talk a little bit about typically how the supply chains of the customers we work with operate, and also where we aim to support our customers in achieving value in the supply chain. So our mantra with CargoValue and Klaveness Digital is to enable the next generation of industrial supply chains. And by that, we really mean seeking to achieve value for our customers, digitalizing and transforming the old ways of working into a new future supply chain. Our key focus is centered around 3 value pillars: resilient, cost-effective, and decarbonized supply chain. So I want to spend just a little time on explaining what we mean by resilient, cost-effective, and decarbonized, and why we think this is important for our customers and industrial companies operating with a seaborne element in their supply chain. So typically our customers would be industrial companies sourcing or supplying raw materials where the seaborne element is a key part of the supply chain. We do have customers that have a lesser extent of seaborne, but our main focus traditionally have been on the seaborne, given our heritage and 75 years of maritime legacy. When we talk about resiliency in the context of industrial companies, whether or not it's the mining side or the end consumer side on the sort of steel manufacturers or the aluminium producers, etc., resiliency to me and to Klaveness Digital is really around managing risks in the supply chain. And if there's one thing that we've all experienced over the past 2 years, and especially this year, is how vulnerable we are in terms of the supply chains of the world. And some of these things are definitely not controllable and not foreseeable per se, but being able to navigate an ever-changing landscape and an ever-changing sort of risk profile is part of our day-to-day jobs, and that's a key driver of what we try to achieve with CargoValue. I will never say that you can avoid risk, but you can manage risk and you can operate efficiently with risk, and you can act accordingly to the risks that you are facing. So, of course, for a lot of our customers, it would pertain to having visibility in order to react when something unexpected happens, and also to be able to turn that reaction, as we said in the headline of this session today, from being reactive to being proactive. And I'll come a little bit back to that later on. Managing the risks in the supply chain, where the seaborne element is obviously a core component. It's also about improving the collaboration between stakeholders. And this is where I'm sort of the technology advocate, saying that there are old ways of managing, manual ways of managing with spreadsheets and manual processes, lots of emails and lots of ad hoc communication. This is an area where we truly believe that technology can improve the way we collaborate, to be able to provide one source of truth, one visibility, and better facilitate collaboration around the different stakeholders. Not only internally, but also where I see the future of industrial supply chain is how can we challenge and how can we improve collaboration between the customers and the suppliers? How can the mining companies get closer to their end steel manufacturers, for instance? How can we collectively reduce the waste in the supply chain through better visibility, more transparency, not necessarily full transparency due to commercial reasons, but more visibility and transparency and better collaboration across the supply chain? And that's where I think technology will play an important role in the years to come. So resiliency is obviously key, critical for any of our receiving customers. Never running out of inventory is an absolute requirement. It's a situation that should never happen, but unfortunately do happen due to the disruptions that we see in the supply chains. Cost effective is maybe the easiest one to grasp, and it's obviously around how can we optimize, how can we reduce, and how can we avoid unnecessary costs. But on the flip side, it's also about how can we avoid loss of sales, how can we maximize the output, how can we essentially again use visibility to take better action, how can we have a longer term planning horizon to reduce the impact of short-term disruption. For a lot of our customers, demurrage is a key topic, and if I can just explain very briefly what that means in the context of transportation, for those of you who are not aware, demurrage is essentially paid waiting time. So in very simple terms. So that means when you have a vessel that is coming in to load in your port or discharging in your port, the vessel that is there, if a vessel needs to wait because your berth is occupied, your port is busy, or you don't have the material that you're loading because of some disruption on the rail side or the truck side, preventing you from load according to plan, well, every minute that vessel is waiting, you have to pay for that vessel to wait. Not necessarily only the supplier loading the vessel that needs to pay, but it's essentially a waste in the supply chain. And it's very often something that can be mitigated or reduced, not always avoided, but very often a waste in the supply chain, and maybe one of the clearest value drivers for customers that we work with when they start with a focus on reducing that waste in the supply chain. And we have many cases where customers have been able, through better visibility and more sort of proactive planning processes through the use of technology or with support of technology, been able to reduce or avoid demurrage in the millions of dollars. So there is obviously dependent on the market of transportation, but in the days that we're living in today, you would probably pay around $30,000 for every day that a vessel is waiting. So it racks up. And as we know, the supply chain works in a cascading way. So one issue will ripple through the supply chain, and subsequent vessels arriving will also be waiting until there is room to load or discharge the vessel. So there is money on the table. A very concrete example is demurrage. The other is obviously about better decision making around taking better decisions when it comes to both sourcing of your materials or supplying materials to your end customers, and also about fixing the most sort of cost-effective freight for transporting those materials. It's all about obviously timing the market. It's also all about choosing a profile and a risk strategy of how you want to be exposed in the market. I don't believe that technology will solve all of that for anyone, but I do believe that technology is a prerequisite to take better decisions. So again, with better visibility, you should be able to have a longer planning horizon. Very simple example, just to put it into context, would be that if you are running out of inventory or in a desperate need of transportation, going into the spot market and fixing freight today in the very short term would probably come with a significant premium, as opposed to being able to have visibility, being able to take a position in the future, looking at the market conditions with a longer horizon would very likely result in a lower freight than taking a rash decision in the short term because of a crisis situation or reactively. The last one I want to mention when we're talking about cost, and it's not necessarily just about cost, but it's about capital effectiveness. Of course, having a lot of inventory tied up means working capital being tied up. And for a lot of the customers of mining companies, working capital management is a key driver of how they employ their capital. So always trying to optimize the supply chain, optimize the level of inventory accordingly to never run out, but at the same time not have a surplus unnecessarily, meaning tied up working capital. This has been a major focus before COVID, and then maybe the shift happened in the beginning of COVID, where a lot of people in the industry were shifting a focus to building inventory for security and due to the uncertainty. So I would say this value driver changes over time due to the conditions that we're operating in. But having a continuous focus on it, I believe, is key to having a sustainable and robust and resilient supply chain over time. So cost effectiveness and resilience, I would say, are the key drivers for most decision making in supply chains as of today. The last value driver that we believe is a key one is moving towards a decarbonized supply chain. And if I'm being fully honest here, this is yet an area where a lot of companies are toe dipping, holding back a little, waiting and seeing. But I think over the past year and a half, we've seen a shift in mentality. We've seen an increased focus. It's obviously been driven by the regulatory agenda. And this is coming. In 2023, we are expecting to see the EU ETS, the trading scheme, coming into play in Europe for all shipments going in and out and internally in Europe. So there will be a tax on carbon in shipping in Europe. It will become a global scheme eventually, but there isn't a clear set timeline for it. We know this is coming. We believe that everyone needs to start acting and start by measuring and then looking to reduce their carbon footprint. But I think for the time being, most industrial companies are naturally focused on their scope 1 emissions. But we do see this as something that will be part of everyone's supply chains, and scope 3 is going to have a cost associated with it, and it needs to be on the agenda. So we want to help and push our customers, but where we are today, of course, the key actions and decisions in the supply chain are being driven by the first two, resiliency and cost effectiveness. Feel free to obviously post your questions as I'm going through my presentation, and we'll try to answer towards the end of the presentation. Just moving on a little bit. So with this in mind, the key value drivers around resilient, cost-effective and decarbonized supply chain. I just want to spend a little time here talking about how we view the supply chain and what we call the cargo life cycle. So when we're working with our customers, our ambition is obviously to support them in an end-to-end supply chain management process, supported by technology with our people in Klaveness Digital. We have the same mindset as Rifle Shot, and this is also how we work with our customers. Technology is important. It's an enabler, but it's not the solution to everything. everything. So being able to continuously evolve and drive our technology in this direction is how we operate. And we are customer centric in how we operate and how we further develop our technology suite of solutions. But the supply chain typically looks like this. Every customer, every company is different, but on a general basis, I believe that the supply chain processes or the life cycle of the cargo moves from left to right, where we are starting on the operational side with a production plan or a consumption plan, and then there is a procurement process or a marketing process if you're a mining company and from an outbound perspective, so sort of the sales and operational planning process. Of course, there's the land-based and the sort of mine operation part, which is not what we do, which is what obviously the other webinar sessions have been talking about and covering. But providing that end-to-end visibility is key for decision making. So the strategic long-term planning processes and then eventually the transportation process, where obviously our heritage comes from on the freight or transportation part. So we try to separate the supply chain process between a planning process and an execution process. And the execution process is typically where obviously the vessels are sailing, loading, discharging, etc. So to break that down a little bit, we have divided the process into three, which resonates with our customers and how they operate their supply chains. And keeping in mind our customers, as I mentioned in the introduction, are not necessarily just mining companies. We do work with a number of mining companies, some of the larger companies in the world, but also different industries like the steel industry with the different smelters, with the aluminium industry. We work with companies in the grain, fertilizer, agricultural industry, cement, building materials, and power utilities on sort of the power plants of the world as well. So there's a range of different industries that we work with and support in their supply chain management process. Common to all of them is this way of sort of thinking of the supply chain process, breaking it down into the long-term strategic planning process, the let's call it the ongoing planning and replanning process, which typically would have a quarterly sort of time perspective, and then the ongoing execution, the daily management of the supply chain, which typically would be the next 7, 14, 30 days in terms of a time frame. Strategic planning would typically be an annual plan or multiple quarters, or some customers also operate on an even longer planning horizon. The key takeaway for this, and the reason why I wanted to talk about this slide, is also to acknowledge that the complexity and the sort of flexibility in the supply chain differs significantly in the different stages of the supply chain process. So in the short term, the daily execution, you are very high on constraints, less flexibility, less available actions to make changes. This is also where a lot of companies operate in a reactive firefighting manner, because this is also where a lot of change happens. When I say constraints, in this case, high constraints, meaning that there are less options for shifting the plans, changing the plans. So the vessels are already on the water. They might already be loading, or they're sailing in to load or discharge. So typically you cannot cancel the shipment at this stage. You cannot really postpone or advance the shipment, but you may still be able to impact the sea passage. You may still be able to speed up the vessel or slow down the vessel, which obviously will impact the time that you spend in port, or when you're arriving, or when you're departing. If all of those options are gone, you may still also be able to control the sequence of when vessels are going to load or discharge, what we call the lineup in the port. So there are options, but there are significant constraints when you're in the short term. And if we're only living in the short term, if we're continuously firefighting and operating here, never being able to lift the perspective and operate in the medium to long term, then our hands are tied very often, and we always just seek to mitigate or reduce the impact in the short term. But as we know, the supply chain has a cascading effect. So the changes that happen in the short term will ripple through the supply chain from a time perspective into the medium term and into the long term. So being able to react quickly in the short term and then take proactive action in the medium to long term is how we believe the future supply chain should operate. And a lot of our customers have already achieved it and are already operating on that model. And the benefit, of course, is that in the medium term, you have fewer constraints, more options available, but still some constraints. So if we're looking at a quarterly basis, you may still be able to target early or late in the window, in the laycan as we call it, but the shipment may have been nominated already, so you may not be able to cancel it. You may not be able to advance it or postpone it, but you can optimize it within certain constraints. There is definitely less flexibility in this time frame. You may not even have the vessel nominated yet, so there is still room to make changes to the plan, and there is a lot of benefit to be made here with the added flexibility you have here compared to the daily. And then, of course, in the long term, you have very few constraints. Here you can add shipments, cancel shipments, postpone advanced shipments, a lot more flexibility. There may still be some constraints, but there's a lot more flexibility. And often I hear, well, it doesn't matter what we do over here because it will change anyways. And that's correct, it will change. The supply chain, especially seaborne supply chains, are prone to change all the time and prone to disruption all the time. But if you only live in the now and the short term reactively and firefighting mode, you will not be able to avoid future ripple on effects in the supply chain. So this is where I believe technology can help us provide visibility, provide us with a longer planning horizon, and being able to act quicker in the short term and spend more time on proactive decision making. Coordination is obviously key in any supply chain, and I believe that most companies would recognize sort of these 4 boxes around here. Obviously, if you don't have a seaborne supply chain, this would not necessarily be relevant. But the operational element, essentially the inventory side, how much are we producing, how much are we consuming, how much do we need, or how much are we going to sell in the market? The procurement or marketing side, the sales and operational planning, where are we going to source it from, or where are we going to sell it to? How are we going to fill the sales forecast for our customers? And then the transportation element, how are we going to transport it? Of course, again, every customer is different. Some would be selling it, you know, on an FOB basis, some on a consign or on a CFR basis. So the freight element differs. But in large, it's about obviously transporting the contracts that have been entered into either by procurement or marketing. And then lastly, of course, how do you then navigate the loading and discharging operations in the port? And coordination typically happens in a sequential one-to-one manner, where the operational side tells the procurement side how much we need and when we need it, or how much we're going to be able to sell every month. And then the procurement side or sales side will be going to their customers or their suppliers, securing the materials. And then the transportation side will be told by the procurement side or the marketing side, this is what I need you to transport. And I'm, of course, saying it in a very simplified manner now. And then typically they will be telling the port, this is when the vessel is arriving. And there are, of course, other external parties involved in this chain. But very often it happens in a sequential manner. But we believe, and we always challenge our customers, that coordination should not happen in a sequential manner. Simply to the fact that we were just talking about in the supply chain process, if a change over here is impacting the short term, it should ripple back through to the mid and sort of long-term planning processes. If an impact on a vessel delay here will cause you to run out of inventory, of course, the operational side needs to know about it immediately. And we cannot have a bunch of spreadsheets and emails going back and forth in order to facilitate that. And this is, again, where I believe technology can play an important part in that coordination. So I'm an advocate for a continuous coordination process where all parties that are relevant should be involved. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a dedicated supply chain team, although some of the more sophisticated customers or mature customers we work with do have that. I would say with your existing setup, bringing together people from your operational side, your procurement side, your freight side or transportation side, and your port side into a coordinating function is a great starting point. And then obviously finding out how do we efficiently coordinate. Is it a weekly meeting or is it a daily call? That differs from customer to customer and the complexity of your setup. But having that coordination mentality and thinking that the function of coordination, their job is to identify when something changes, what has changed, what's the consequences of those changes for each of the constituents in our supply chain, and what can we do about it, evaluating the potential actions to rectify the situation or remedy the situation or mitigate the impact of that situation. And then the action taking again differs on where you are on the time horizon. Is it a short-term crisis? Well, then maybe we can slow down or speed up the vessel. Or maybe we can't do that. Well, then let's see if we can change the lineup to prioritize this vessel where we're running out of inventory, or this vessel which has a higher demurrage rate than the other vessel. So this will be the most cost-effective option. If we're in the longer term, we may be able to move the laycan, postpone a shipment, advance a shipment. We may be able to evaluate alternative sourcing strategies. So the actions is obviously dependent on where you are in the time horizon, but the need for continuous coordination is the key takeaway and what I want to leave with you on this slide. I believe this can be done, and I believe all companies should strive towards this way of operating their supply chain. Just a little commenting then about CargoValue, since I've now talked about generically what supply chains look like and how I believe and we believe that supply chains can be operated with support of technology. CargoValue is a technology solution, but we're not just a technology company. We have technology to support our customers, but we also have a team of experts that work closely with our customers to achieve the value that we talked about in my introduction around cost-effective, resilient and decarbonized supply chain. But in order to achieve value, you need to take action. And in order to take action, the foundation, we believe, is visibility. If you don't have visibility of what's currently ongoing, what's the plan, and what's the impact of any change to that plan, well, then you cannot take timely and right actions. So visibility is the foundation, having one version of the truth of your inventory, your plans, and your schedule for shipments, vessels, or other modes of transportation is the prerequisite for good decision making. Visibility and having one version of the truth is about having the plan, but it's also about capturing what's happening every day. So when that vessel is delayed or when that grade of raw material is less than what you had planned for, your consumption may change. There is maintenance that impacts your plan. All of these events that happening that changes the plan should be captured. And that's all about visibility, having that visibility. Of course, the ambition is to have real-time visibility, but at the state we are in today, we are not yet at real-time visibility throughout all supply chains. Some have sensor data and can provide more real-time information on inventory, on production, etc. But that's by far not where most companies are today. So near real-time is probably a better phrase. And near real-time is better than a weekly spreadsheet or a monthly spreadsheet that only gets updated from a financial forecasting perspective. So being able to have visibility, one version of the truth, again, is the foundation for actively managing the supply chain. But visibility and data isn't really that valuable unless you can turn it into something actionable. And in CargoValue, of course, there's a big focus on visibility and providing you a simple and intuitive overview of your inventory situation, your forecast, and your actuals and your plans for your shipments, but also being able to then turn that visibility and data into something actionable. We call it intelligence, and it's about highlighting what is the impact of these changes that happen. What is the result of this? Is it now leading to a conflict in my schedule? I need to know about that. Are we running out of inventory, or are we going to run full on inventory? Which means we need to maybe stop the rail scheduling, which means we may need to reduce our production. All of these events you should be notified about, you should have full visibility on, and you should be able to evaluate what the impact is. Are you now with these changes exposed to demurrage or paid waiting time in your supply chain? You should know about that. So that's the intelligence layer. And then with intelligence, you should be equipped to take action. But technology is not taking action for you. CargoValue or any other solution will not be able to take the action for you. We need human beings to take conscious decisions, but technology is there to support us in taking the best possible actions based on the visibility we have, based on the intelligence that we have, and based on sort of the ability to evaluate what can we do, what would be the consequences of doing these actions, and then choosing which one to take. You would still need to communicate with the ship owner to ask them to slow down the vessel. But through technology, we can know that this is the best option, this is what we should do, and we should ask them to reduce it by 2 knots in order to get to my port 3 days later, for instance. So these are examples. This is not an exhaustive list. And of course, we're doing all of these steps in order to achieve value, whether or not it's reducing working capital, whether or not it's improving our sourcing strategy to get the most cost-effective material cost or total landed costs in our supply chain, minimize the risks in the supply chain, reduce the carbon footprint in the supply chain, just as some examples. And again, the actions can differ from where you are in the timeline of the cargo life cycle. In the short term, you may have less actions available, more complexity or constraints, less flexibility. In the longer term, you may have more strategic options available to take action. We don't want to we had the headline here saying from reactive to proactive, but I don't think we can stop being reactive because unexpected events are happening all the time in the supply chain. So you still need to be reactive, and reaction is the prerequisite for being proactive because you need to take action in the short term in an effective, timely manner. And then you need to lift the horizon and be proactive on the back of the reactions that we are taking in the short term. Technology will not take action. Technology is there to support us. And I didn't say this in the beginning, but of course I'm talking about the product that we have and CargoValue, and I'm a technology guy, but at the same time, I don't believe that any solution can solve everything, which is also why I like the rifle shot approach with the webinar series to illustrate and show that we are many different technology and service providers focused on solving parts of the supply chain puzzle, and we can complement each other. And every customer is different and every challenge is different. But I truly believe in collaboration, and I truly believe that you need to bring together different solutions to get to the future supply chain. But our role, of course, is trying to provide that end-to-end supply chain visibility for our customers and help them in managing the supply chain through the life cycle of the cargo. So I'm not going to go into showing the solution or doing a demo. I could probably talk for hours doing that, but I want to show you a little glimpse into what we have in CargoValue. And so these are some screenshots from our solution and typically examples of how customers are using CargoValue to manage their supply chain. So one of our largest customers manage more than 25 locations across the globe, with a number of different commodities and raw materials at each of those locations. They obviously have decentralized operational responsibilities, but they have a centralized view on the supply chain and the coordination of the supply chain across the different raw materials flows. Other customers are single site customers with maybe 1 or 2 commodities, so a lot simpler in that sense, but equally important, being able to coordinate, manage what's happening in the short term, and then replan ongoing and continuously replanning in the medium to long term. Visibility is the foundation. So having visibility on your inventory, where typically customers would have an operational system where they integrate the actual data into CargoValue, and then they do their planning and forecasting process in CargoValue as an example. That obviously drives the shipment planning and the scheduling of shipments, whether or not you're an inbound or an outbound case. And then, of course, having that transportation and execution visibility, looking at where are my vessels, when are they going to arrive, what's the plan that I have in my port in terms of the sequence of loading and discharging these vessels. One version of the truth, and moving from sort of silos to be able to collaborate around this one version of the truth, I think is is a key value of using technology such as CargoValue to support your supply chain. Intelligence is, again, of course, about turning that visibility into something actionable. It's about evaluating the impact of changes in the schedule, of the unexpected, and what the results of that would be. Of course, there's a lot of different examples to cover here, but equipping our customers with tools and solutions, whether or not it's dashboards with alerts and sort of action taking, which is their landing page when they're operating on a daily basis, or the ability to dig into historical data to run analysis and evaluate what can we learn from the history in terms of better planning the future. Running scenarios on different alternatives. What if we advance or postpone? What if we add? What if we remove? Identifying sort of market-to-market effects of rerouting one shipment to another location are just a handful of examples from how you can use the intelligence and where technology can help us think faster than we can do with spreadsheets and manual processes. Identifying obviously where you need to take action and what you can do to avoid costly sort of outages, etc., in the supply chain. So intelligence is obviously something we're continuously working on, something we're being pushed by our customers to continuously add new value into the solution, and exploring new avenues of intelligence, using sort of smartness and compute power to do things that we struggle with doing as human beings. And then, of course, taking action is, again, tying it all together, being able to see what are the potential actions and what would be the consequences of taking those actions and which one of those actions should I take. Now, I wish I could say we had the magic button that did all of those actions for you, but of course, it's about equipping you and supporting you in taking timely action based on the data, based on the visibility from sort of day to day across the different functions in the supply chain. So moving away from sort of firefighting in the short term to actually being able to become proactive and to be able to optimize the supply chain. And again, you know, bringing it all back to the value, this is what it's all about. We really want to help customers reduce costs, maximize their sales, if that's the sort of the focus, minimizing working capital, reducing the risk or managing or navigating the risks in the supply chain. And again, every customer is different, but I'm obviously proud of the customers that we work with and how they've been able to manage and reduce costs and optimize their supply chain and reduce waste in the supply chain. So one of our customers, when they started working with us, which is one of the mining companies we work with in Australia, in their first 3 months, they managed to reduce their demurrage by more than $300,000 simply on better planning and through better visibility in CargoValue. They were managed to reduce the demurrage that they had forecasted for those 3 months. Working capital is obviously something that may be less important during crisis, where you're more concerned about having a high safety stock and you know, being prepared for disruption. But in times where that has been a focus for our customers, we've seen strategic initiatives working on reducing, sustainably reducing working capital, operating their schedules towards the lower end of their safety stock, and the sustainable savings. One of our customers managed to reduce their working capital by more than $100 million. So there is definitely a lot of value. But again, every customer is different, and we love to work with customers to identify where can we make an impact and how can we achieve quick wins together on the journey. And it is a journey, and this is where I will very shortly end my presentation. We believe it is a journey. Technology is an enabler. It's important, but it's not going to solve everything. It's also about change management and changing the ways we're working. It's about people, process, supported by technology. And we, just like Rifle Shot, work with our customers, and we're driven by working with customers to achieve value in a stepwise manner. And we believe that it can be a self-funding model where you can achieve value every step of the way. and actually become competitive when it comes to your supply chain. So we'd love to take part of your digitalization journey. So please reach out, and we'd be more than happy to discuss and learn more about the challenges you're seeing in your supply chain. And maybe we can find ways of supporting you on that journey and helping you. So I'll end there and leave room for questions in the last 10 minutes. So thank you very much, and of course reach out to me and check out our webpage if you want more information.
Thank you very much, Alec.
Thank you.
We do have some questions. The first one is, which third-party systems would you integrate with to get one version of the truth? Because presumably the detail has to be drawn from production planning, procurement, legal, or at every stage of the process.
Yeah, so this is a good question. And again, every customer is different, but I would say all of our customers would have an ERP system. So a lot have SAP, Oracle, etc. So an ERP system is typically, most companies have an ERP system. Also most companies would have some sort of operational system. Of course, the sophistication differs a lot, but typically an operational system where actuals would come from. So that would be where you would pull out the information about how much did we produce yesterday, or how much did we consume yesterday. Very often forecasting happens in spreadsheets. So of course, one of our missions is to help people get away from spreadsheets, because we think there are better ways of doing it. But that's also a change management process. So typically the start of the supply chain process that I showed would start with integrating with an operational system to feed inventory information, like you say. And there we obviously we can integrate with any number of operational systems. Sometimes our customers have more advanced IT organizations, and they're able to utilize our API to feed data in. Other times, IT may be a limited capacity on the customer side, and there we would support them and help them essentially pull data from their systems. So we do both. On the ERP side, again, SAP or Oracle. SAP is not SAP. I mean, there are many different versions of it, and every customer have their own sort of setup. So, and their own usage as well. So it depends on obviously how customers use their ERP system. Very often I see ERP systems being used as a financial forecasting system, maybe also more of a transactional system. So some of our customers would have their contracts in SAP, and then they would integrate SAP with CargoValue to generate the shipment purely from a contractual perspective. And then they would use CargoValue to make the actual plan based on those with the link to the contracts. And then, so there are obviously every customer is different, have different systems, but I think ERP systems, operational systems would be very typical to see. And then the other element would be more on the transportation side. So larger organizations would probably have their own transportation team, big or small. If you're in the sort of bigger end, you may also have what we call a voyage management system. So a system focused on managing freight, and in our case, seaborne freight. So we very often integrate with their voyage management system, where they essentially do the freight contracts in the voyage management system. And then they obviously do all the planning in CargoValue. And then the execution can be done both in the voyage management system and in CargoValue. So there we would often send data back and forth between the voyage management system and CargoValue. And then on the end of the supply chain, you would have the settlement process, which is not part of what we do in CargoValue. And that would typically then happen in, let's say, an ERP system or some other financial system. So we've built our system around being interoperable and being able to connect with systems, both feed data into CargoValue and pull data out of CargoValue. We've done that from day one, and it's back to my statement that I don't believe one solution can do everything and cover everything. So we need to find sort of the different elements of the supply chain process and then make them play nicely together. So that's at least how we approach it, and how we've successfully been able to do it with our customers.
Thank you. And presumably that's incremental and starting with wherever there's the most value or the most need.
Yeah, and again, it differs, right? So some customer would start with a focus on one location or one commodity flow and multiple locations, and then scale from there to more commodity flows or to more locations. So and again, it depends, right? So, but very often the easiest is to integrate with the inventory because the inventory data is less complex than shipment data. Where shipment data obviously contains a lot more information around counterparties, around vessels, around all of these different scheduling dates, arrival times, load dates, load rates, and all of these things. So there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to the shipment part. The inventory part is, and I'm obviously simplifying it a bit now, but it's essentially how much are we consuming or how much are we producing every day, and what are we taking out and in of those inventories every day. So it's simpler from a data model perspective and from an integration perspective.
Okay, thank you. And then you mentioned 3 elements, which were cost-effective, resilient, and decarbonized. How does the decarbonization fit in?
Yeah, so I touched a little bit on it, and I said that I would say it's a lot of toe dipping in the industry for now when it comes to Scope 3 emissions. But what I believe is the beauty of this is that truly getting to a decarbonized supply chain would mean new technology, new types of fuel for transport. We need to move to vessels that are built for zero emissions, which we don't have today. But the technology is being developed, and it's coming, and it will come, and shipping will get to net zero. But the timeline is still a big question mark, obviously. We're pushing for that as a company. But I believe there's a tremendous value here and now. We should not just wait for the regulatory agenda. We should not just wait for new fuels to remove the problem. We need to act now if we're going to meet the targets that the world has set and the UN has set to get to net zero. So in the terms of the operational and the sort of here and now low-hanging fruits, we believe that you need to start by measuring. So that's something that we do with our customers in CargoValue. You have all of your shipments, essentially all of the historical data and all of the forward-looking data, which means you can then also calculate your emissions based on the different vessels that you're utilizing, since we're now talking about the seaborne transportation. So start by measuring, which is in parallel to what I talked about. Visibility is the starting point. And then using that visibility and that measurement to identify what are the biggest drivers of emissions in my supply chain. Are there certain sourcing alternatives that are driving the emission footprint? Are there certain ship owners or vessels that are driving a negative footprint for me? Are there certain ports and certain operational elements that are causing me to have a higher than necessary footprint? So that's the intelligence layer, analyzing the emissions and analyzing the current footprint, and then taking action you can start taking today. So the beauty here is that everything that you can do around cost effectiveness pertaining to reducing waiting time and demurrage, for instance, is directly impacting the emissions. So the simple explanation is, if a vessel is running with 10 knots as opposed to 15 knots, that vessel is obviously going to consume less fuel. It will take slightly longer to do the sea passage, which may be beneficial to reduce the waiting time when they're today very often racing to wait in port. So if we can minimize the waiting time, we are actively minimizing the footprint of those shipments. So there are quick wins that can be made here and now that will have a positive impact on the environmental footprint of the supply chain. So we still need to create new green fuels that are zero emissions, but we should not wait for it, right? So and for all of you that today and in 2023 will have any transportation to and from customers or suppliers in Europe, you will be exposed to a tax on carbon through the EU ETS scheme. Whether or not it starts on the 1st of January or it will be phased in during 2023 is still not fully decided, but this is coming and you cannot just sit and wait. You have to start acting now.
Thank you.